The Oupes Mega 1 is the smallest, lightest, and cheapest Mega they have. We reviewed this guy's bigger brothers earlier this year, but even though they all share the same name, it doesn't mean they are all created equally. And so today, we're gonna share our experience with the Oupes Mega 1. So welcome back to the lab where our opinions cannot be bought. So far this year, we've actually been recommending Oupes as one of our budget options that we do recommend. It's got a good company, they have American support. There's a lot that goes into this little Oupes power station that actually makes it something we would recommend to you guys. But like I said, not all power stations, even if they have the same name, are created equally. So we do, as always, have links in the description down below. If at any point you just want to check this thing out, go to Oupes' website. We'll try to squeeze any coupon codes we can out of Oupes. Otherwise, before we jump into it, we're going to hit you with a super quick spec teardown in case you're not already familiar with the Oupes Mega 1. It's pronounced Opus, but you can't make a name like this and not have everybody calling it Oupes, so we're calling it Oupes. First up, this thing passes the tiny baby lift test. It weighs 28 pounds. Honestly, this is the first power station I've ever picked up where I would say it actually feels lighter than that. I feel like that's an overestimate. It's a 1024 watt hour battery bank, and that battery bank is actually expandable up to 5.12 kilowatt hours with 2 of their expansion batteries. It's got an output of 2000 watts with a pure sine wave inverter. In terms of charging this guy up, you have a regular plug right here. You can just plug it into a 120 volt house outlet in your house. It also has an 800 watt solar input, which is honestly pretty good. And when it comes to ports, you have 420 volt AC ports on the front. You have your 2 barrel connectors as well as a 12 volt car socket, which I love to see. And we also have 2 USB-Cs as well as 4 USB-As. The screen is decent. It's just like all the other Oupes screens, although this one seems to be the hardest to see. Not entirely sure what that's about, but from the whole left side shot of the unit, almost looks like the screen's off. And the app is okay. It looks like the first power station app that was ever invented, but it works. And the best part about this power station is it is $699, and we've actually seen it as low as $439. And at that price, you almost can't go wrong. We're gonna get into the results of our testing in just a minute, but first I wanna share with you the things that I like about this Oupes Mega 1 power station. And first up is it has a nice size inverter compared to the battery size. A lot of power stations, when you get a small, only 1000 watt battery, you tend to get a pretty small inverter because they want it to last, which makes sense. But Oupes wants you to be able to use even the small amount of power that you have, and giving us a 2000 watt inverter with a 1024 watt hour battery bank, to me, very nice pairing. Most people that buy something this small won't ever use it that aggressively, but if you're in an emergency or you have a power outage or you just randomly need to use a bunch of power, you can have a tiny unit like this. You could have your fridge, some lights, a toaster, and a coffee maker running almost all at the same time, depending on how old your toaster and coffee maker are. I also like that this unit has tons of different port options with the 2 barrel connectors and the 12 volt being retained. A lot of smaller power stations and even bigger ones, they're getting rid of the 12 volt car socket. And especially for someone like me, my main use for portable power stations is camping. If you don't have these 3 plugs, you're kind of screwed. I also like the crazy high solar input. That usually I say, hey, this battery is 1000, the solar input is 500. That's not bad. It's like half. You can charge it in 2 hours. 800 watts is almost the full size of the battery. So being able to put this thing outside in the sun and charge it in just over an hour and then just get right back to using it is super, super nice. A lot of other companies, it's usually like half the battery capacity is the solar input or less. It takes a couple of hours to charge it up in the sun. This, very quick. But overall, this unit doesn't have any crazy features. It's not trying to be anything it's not, and that's what I like about it. It's just simple, does what it needs to do. And Oupes has American support, which is great. When we call them, you get someone in California, and they have a help project. So they're already a cheap brand, and they donate a percentage of revenue to giving power stations to people in need, which I love to see, especially considering they're already an affordable brand. The fact that they're not just lining their pockets. To us here at the lab, that's really cool. And on the short list of things that we don't like about this power station, you should know this by now, there's no light. I'm a huge light guy, and I don't care what anybody says. Having a light on a power station, whether you agree or not, is a huge, huge pro. And once you actually have one of these in your life and you're walking around with it and there's a light on it, you'll be super happy that you have one. And unfortunately, this guy has no light. I always got to dock points for no light. I also don't like that the screen is kind of hard to see from certain angles. It's frustrating because you look and you're like, oh my God, the thing's off. And then you walk over to it to turn it back on and you realize the screen's on. You just can't see it from this angle. You can see it way better that way than this way. I don't get it. The other Oupes power stations don't do that. They kind of do it, but it's not this bad. And the other thing I don't like, this is the first Oupes power station that when you try to surge it, it pulls voltage, which let's just get into the testing and I'll explain. We're gonna start this testing with the surge because that's what I was just talking about. Now, most units have a amount of time they will surge over their rated output. This thing's rated for 2000 watts. So if you try to run 2500 watts or 3000, it should blip to let something like a vacuum or something that pulls a lot of power initially and then calms down, surge and then start working. This unit, unfortunately, pulls voltage, which I usually freak out about. And the reason I'm not freaking out is because it also surges really quickly after it pulls voltage. But if you try to go past 2000 watts, basically what happens is as the load goes up, the voltage comes down to keep it under 2000 watts. It only does it for like 10 seconds and then it shuts the whole thing off. But if you were running a computer or something like an electronic device off of this, it's terrible. I know people say that they do it to protect the unit, but if I had my computer running off this, that is so bad for my computer. I would rather have a safe computer than a safe power station. So don't love it, but thankfully it only does it for a couple of seconds before it actually kills its entire self. When it comes to efficiency, efficiency is important because if you have a 100 watt heated sleeping bag and you're taking this camping, it's a 1000 watt hour battery bank. It should run that sleeping bag for 10 hours if it's 100% efficient. If it's only 80% efficient, you're only gonna get 8 hours. 8 hours is plenty of time to sleep, but in certain situations, that could become very annoying. So 1024 watt hour battery bank with a 2000 watt inverter. We ran a 1779 watt load, which is right near the top of the inverter. So the inverter's working hard, the fans are pumping. That's when this will be the least efficient. It should have lasted about 34 minutes. It actually lasted 27 minutes, which is 79% efficient, which is like an A-, a B+. It's a B+. Anything over 85, we give a big thumbs up to, but something to note is that this unit dies at 2%. So it might've got pretty close, but I actually prefer that it dies early. It saves the last 2% of battery to keep the fans running to cool the unit back down after it just finished doing a really, really hot activity. That's good. A lot of name brand power stations don't do that. And so they'll turn off after running a big load for a long time and they just continue to get hotter and hotter and hotter because the fans aren't running. So I actually prefer dying a little early and keeping the fans on. I wish more big names did that. When it comes to charge speed, we just plugged it into a regular wall outlet, turned fast charging on the app, and this thing got to like 87% in 35 minutes or something like that. Like, it was insane how fast it got there. Obviously the wattage comes down and it puts the last little bit in slowly. It still did a full charge in just under an hour, which is pretty impressive. The solar input on this guy works. We weren't able to push it to the 800 watts because it's been a blizzard here for the last couple weeks, but the voltage requirements and everything are fine. Any solar panels that we did plug in work fine, and the voltage limits on the input and the amperage limits and stuff are completely workable. Like, it's not a hard number to play with. In terms of sound test, this sounds like a Dell computer from 2006 trying to mine Bitcoin. It is loud. It is super, super loud. And last up, pass-through. So if you're running a load, can you also, when it starts running out of battery, plug it into the wall or plug it into solar panels, continue to run your load while using the rest of the power to charge the battery bank? And the answer is yes. It works for AC pass-through and it also works for solar pass-through. So to end this off, I still think the couple of flaws that this unit has aside, if you can get it for like $439 or anything in that price range, there's units with a lot smaller inverters and batteries that cost the same or more. And honestly, our experience with this, it was pretty good. Like I said, there's a couple of things I didn't love, but it's not a bad unit by any means. I also, again, can't fail to mention American support. American support is huge. That's really hard to find, even with big name companies. So you know what? When it comes down to it, I actually think here at the lab, we would recommend grabbing this Oupes Mega 1 as more of like a budget alternative to some of the name brands. Let me know what you guys think. Leave a comment down below. That is all I got for you guys today. We will catch you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Peace out and stay charged.